After a very long and tense negotiation period, the New York Mets and Pete Alonso have finally agreed to a 2-year, $54 million deal with an opt-out. Despite a larger 3-year offer being on the table, Pete Alonso chose to stay in Queens. According to Bob Nightingale, the deal was finalized on Wednesday in Tampa with Pete Alonso, his agent Scott Boras, Mets owner Steve Cohen, and president of baseball operations David Stearns all present. But why is Pete so determined to remain with the Mets? We're breaking down the deal and more on this episode of Mets Post. Let's get it. It happened. It finally happened. The Mets and Pete Alonso finally put their differences aside and came together on a 2-year, $54 million deal with an opt-out, of course. His first year, he'll be making $30 million, and his second year is worth $24 million if he chooses to stay. The good thing about this deal is that it does not tie the Mets to Pete Alonso long term, which is a huge win-win. If he has a down season at the plate, there's a likelihood that he does opt in and to remain with the Mets, but the Mets are only on the hook for $24 million. If he does have a good year, then he opts out, possibly gets a bigger deal with another team or with the Mets. One way or another, this is a big win-win for David Stern and Steve Cohen. This is a big win for the Mets. One, you get your first baseman, a homegrown talent to stay with you for another year or two. But another thing is that this puts all the pressure on Pete Alonso to put up big numbers and bring consistency to the plate this season. This does not tie them to Pete long-term, which I know Pete Alonso wanted the long-term deal. But the Mets are tied to him short-term, which, hey, if he has a down season, he may opt in. And if he does opt in, he's only on the hook for $24 million. If he has a big season, then you know he's going to opt out in hopes of a bigger payday. This puts all the pressure on Pete Alonso to put up big numbers and bring consistency day in, day out to the plate. He could be following the route of Blake Snell, Carlos Correa, and Matt Chapman. They all signed short-term deals with that one-year opt-out that Scott Boras loves to have his players sign, and they all earned bigger paydays because of their great play. It's been reported that Pete turned down a 3-year, $70 million deal to re-sign with the Mets. It shows how much he values the franchise and how much he wants to stay in Queens. He never wanted to leave despite the money, the bigger money that was on the table for him as well. And it's also a huge reality check when his market didn't develop the way he expected it to. But Pete's desire to stay in New York never wavered. I understand he wanted to feel valued, but he overplayed his hand significantly. Let's not forget that Pete Alonso fumbled his own payday after turning down the initial 7-year, $158 million deal. Then he rejected the Mets' 3-year deal that was worth about $70 million with no opt-outs. So he had to settle for a short-term deal, which is, again, a huge win-win for David Stearns. He gets a power bat in the lineup at a price that he wanted him to be at. But look, I'm not here to bash Pete. I'm happy he's back. My only thing, as I mentioned in previous videos, was that I didn't want the franchise to overpay for him long term. He's had 2 down years that haven't been consistent at the plate, but he has come up clutch for us in those 2 years as well. So now that the deal is over, let's take a look at what the Mets 2025 batting lineup actually looks like. And it's a hell of a lineup if you ask me. You have from top to bottom, Francisco Lindor leading off, followed by Juan Soto. Then you have Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos batting cleanup, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, who could be juggling that spot in the DH with Jesse Winker. You have Francisco Alvarez, who could be having a big breakout season this year. The return of Jeff McNeil is the only one I feel is questionable because we don't know if McNeil was actually going to be in this roster to start opening day or if the Mets move him for a bigger player. You could also see Luis Angel Acuna take his spot, but then to round out the lineup, you have Jose Siri in rotation with Tyron Taylor. The Mets finally have a lineup that opposing pitchers will fear, especially when it comes to playoff time. The potential of this lineup is unquestionable. You have 4 hitters, maybe even 5, that are capable of hitting 25-plus home runs this season, while the top 4 have the potential to hit 35-plus. Lindor had a phenomenal season last year. In my opinion, he should have won MVP. He was day in, day out on the field, in the lineup. He wasn't playing DH all the time. I understand Ohtani had the shoulder injury, but let's not ignore the fact that Lindor was also playing defense while hitting the way he was hitting. Then you also have Mark Vientos, who had a hell of a year last year, had a batting average of .266. He hit 27 home runs, 71 RBIs. I feel like that could be a consistent bat in this lineup. And you actually now have the protection around Juan Soto that everybody was questioning. I understand that we don't have Aaron Judge in this lineup, but we have more than just one player that can produce. You have an MVP caliber to start off the lineup in Francisco Lindor. You have Pete Alonso, who we know has a very big bat. And then you have Mark Vientos, Brandon Nimmo that can provide consistency behind those big name players. Now, the ultimate question is, where do the Mets go from here? Now that Pete Alonso is set and first base is officially occupied, this means that Mark Vientos is your everyday third baseman, and he rightfully should be. But what does this mean for a player like Brett Beatty, Luis Angel Acuna? Should the Mets pivot into trading some key prospects for a pitcher like Dylan Cease, who they were rumored to be in on? Dylan Cease could give you a much-needed ace in a rotation that is questionable after Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea. Do you give up Jet Williams or Luis Angel Acuna, maybe even Ryan Clifford and McNeil or Marte in exchange for Dylan Cease? I feel like the Mets could even look into having the Padres add in a player like Robert Suarez. The Mets would bolster both their rotation and the bullpen with that move. In 2024, Dylan Cease had an ERA of 3.47 along with 224 strikeouts. He started 33 games and had 14 wins. Cease pitched 189 innings last year for the Padres. He also had a WAR of 4.2. Now, the good thing about Cease is that he's only owed $13.7 million in 2025. Which means after 2025, he's expected to be a free agent. I get it. This means he's a rental player. Unless the Mets extend him after the trade, but we all know that's unlikely. Being that he's 29 years old, there's an unlikelihood that Stearns keeps him around after this season. As for Robert Suarez, he had 36 saves last season, an ERA of 2.77 and 59 strikeouts. He also had a win above replacement of 2.1, is owed only $10 million for the 2025 season and has a player option for 2026 and 2027. If he does opt in, he'll make $8 million in each of those seasons, but it is unlikely that he does opt in. Although he will make $8 million in each of those seasons, Suarez is likely to command more money as a free agent. So how do you feel about the Mets re-signing Pete Alonso and the potential of this lineup? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. My name is Bryan Cameron. I am the host of Mets Post, so make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys next week. Let's go Mets.